You're listening to Breaking New Ground. In this podcast, we provide thought-provoking conversations for those looking to begin or advance their entrepreneurial real estate goals.
Together, we'll venture into the world of commercial real estate with entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo, building innovative paths with bold approaches.
We're your hosts. I'm John Pugh, a real estate developer and investor.
And I'm Rachel Walters, a real estate marketing expert. Throughout our episodes, we'll bring in real estate trailblazers, creating a space for inspiring conversations surrounding commercial real estate.
Pugh Management is proud to sponsor the podcast Breaking New Ground. Pugh Management is a premier developer for mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial properties. We love to develop places to live, work, and play. Pugh Management partners with family offices and institutional investors on projects in New England and Central Florida. Check us out online at pughmgmt.com.
In today's episode, Andrew Consigli is joining us to share his entrepreneurial journey in commercial real estate.
Andrew is a real estate developer focused on mixed-use, mixed-income projects.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, nice to join you as well. Thank you.
We're excited to have you on and kind of learn more. You know, Rachel and I started this podcast, I think, with a focus on really learning more about people's journeys into being real estate entrepreneurs and kind of everyone comes at it from a different kind of angle and different life experience. And love to kind of dig into some of those experiences and then just talk more about what you're up to now. So would love to hear kind of your origin story, kind of where did you start? And I know you worked as an architect for a long time. Would love to kind of hear, how did you come to the conclusion that real estate development was something you wanted to be involved with?
I grew up around construction. My family owns a large construction company, commercial construction company. The idea is I was going to go to college and get out and start working for the company, right? And during college, I started to have a liking towards the design aspect of building, right? Building and design. And then further got into more of a liking of or interest in urban design. So in placemaking, right? And so that's what led me down the path to eventually start a career in architecture, which I did for, about 25 years. Worked for two firms. One was a smaller firm that was focused around urban design and architecture that worked on Mashpee Commons down Cape Cod. Sort of a very nationally known new urbanist community, and worked there for 8 years or so, and then my remaining years were working for Elkis Manfredi, large architecture firm, again focused around urban design and placemaking, both internationally and nationally, and then sort of towards the end of say 2012, 2013, I thought working for developers throughout my architecture career, I sort of wanted to try my hand in that part of the business, right? Development.
So was that kind of you saying, hey, I mean, it was for me at least. I'm curious if you had a similar realization. Was it you saying, okay, I'm doing all this design. I enjoy it. I love the building process, but I'm not really in control of the outcome in terms of the product? Or what was it that spurred you to want to kind of take that leap?
Yeah, I think I was probably around 40, years old, and I was traveling a lot internationally and sort of wanted to be closer to home. That was one major thing. And instead of moving on to another type of architecture firm, maybe closer to home, I thought, hey, why don't I, get out of my comfort zone and learn new things. And one of the things I didn't really know much about was the financial aspects of development. Interest rates, bank financing, raising equity, all those good things, right, that we're kind of in the middle of right now, this challenging times. And I wanted to learn more about that. So I jumped in, head first and started learning about that. And I also felt that there was a need in the development community that I wasn't seeing so much, where we do a lot of my interest has been public-private partnerships, figuring out very sort of complex zoning and planning exercises for, um, downtowns and, so downtowns and, focusing around mixed use and walkability and, all the good stuff that you and I have talked about over the years. And so I thought, to use the value that I've learned and the things that I've learned in the past, 20, 25 years working in architecture for some great firms, I could, really kind of put that to work um, on my own. And that's what I've been doing now for, I think I was generally around 2014, I started Civico, and, about 10 years later, we've done some interesting projects and are involved in some really interesting projects that we'd like to, keep that momentum going.
So one of the things we like to do is kind of dig into the beginnings of a company and kind of some of the challenges you face when you start, you just get started. And I know you and I have been working together for many years now on different things. And when your first project, maybe tell us a little bit more about your first project as a developer and how that served maybe as a stepping stone to other things.
Yeah, the first project, I mean, there was a few smaller ones that I worked on, early on. But the first sort of major project that I worked on was a project called Abbey Road in Sherborne. And it was a development of um, 18 townhomes. And the idea was it was a pocket neighborhood style development where, when you call it sort of a front porch community or a green space or a community space, that is the focal point of the development. Whereas typically in sort of townhome housing developments, you drive into a development and it's a bunch of garage doors and there's no real sense of place or community. This idea turned it sort of around where all the garages and the vehicular access was around the back, and the community space, there was a layers of public space, whether it's the public space in the center and then semi-public space on the porches, and then you get your private spaces in the back. So that idea of promoting community within sort of it's almost like a community within a community, right? That was my first major project, and I did that with another developer that was looking for a partner named Bob Murchison, Phoenix Partners, and that was a very successful project, planning wise and working with the town, and that was a challenging zoning change and challenging construction, challenging budget, challenging everything, right? And I really learned a lot throughout that process. But in the end, it turned out fantastic in terms of, the end product. And, folks call me today and are ecstatic about living at Abbey Road because of the sense of community. And nice. So, the more I can do those types of projects, the happier I am, doing my work. So,
Andrew, I have a question since we do not know each other. So I want to dig in a little deeper. Had you already gone out on your own when you started this partnership, or did this partnership come up organically? How did this project start?
So when I got out of architecture in 2014, I was looking for projects, right? I think as a developer, that's the hardest part of starting a business, development business, is finding projects. And that's how John and I met. I reached out to John and started talking, and we ended up kind of working on something later on. But, when I got out, I was like, I'd love to work on a project. I just can't start from scratch. So what I did is I reached out to my network, right? And that network ended up leading me to a family friend of someone else. And that person was permitting this project, this townhome project. And he was permitting it in the usual townhome format, right? The architect and the engineer, really the civil engineer, was designing the project. And it was just a standard townhome development, like I mentioned, with the garage doors and all, and no sense of community. And I came in and said, hey, listen, I'm an architect, urban designer. I love this new concept that's really coming out from sort of the West Coast called, pocket neighborhoods. There's some books about it, and just it's more prevalent in the West Coast, right? And so I proposed that to him, and he's like, I love the idea. Let's redesign the project. And I was able to add sort of my sweat equity is in terms of the design and architecture aspect of it. And I was able to add some financial equity as well to take off some of the risk of him. And it was a great partnership. And, he was, to this day, he's still an investor and development partner of mine. And that was 10 years ago. And we went through a really hard project together. So, will continue to work with him because of that, going through that project with him. It was satisfying. It was a great project. Not to say it was a bad project. It was a very complex, complicated project, but learned a lot from it, and it ended up turning out great.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really interesting overview. I think a lot of people, when they first get into projects, that to me has always been the challenge that you said earlier, is kind of how do you fill the gaps in terms of your knowledge about the process, and really build the team around kind of the right group of people. I think you hit on a really important part of the process that I feel like is key, because I feel like so many people, when they start out in real estate entrepreneurship and specifically development, they say to themselves, "Oh, I have to be this, the person," whether they're in nobody's background really prepares them to be singularly the one person in charge of the whole project. I feel like, because it's, as you said, development such a complex. It's a complex thing that you can't just necessarily, you're not born knowing. No matter if you might know how to build something, you might know how to finance something, you might know how to legally get some approvals, but it always takes a team, which I think is,
you're wearing many hats as a developer, and I think the strength of Civico is its partners that we work with, whether they're Civico partners, or whether they're partners meaning the community, the town, right, consultants, and so on and so forth. It's, if we're picking the type of projects that are complex, whether they're mixed income or affordable, and they come with the challenges of acquiring subsidies and working with the state and different agencies. I mean, it's really hard to do all that on your own, right?
Yep.
And also to diversify and do multiple projects, so the key really for Civico and for me was to find the right partners to work with. And obviously, John, you were one of them very early on with the Royal Landing, which was a great project. But, a lot of what we do is, I have two other partners, David Oliveri and Taylor Bearden, both of whom, are integral, very integral into what we do as a firm here. And so, and then also, like I mentioned, towns, town of Lincoln, right, we worked with. They were fantastic to work with. And, town of Reading, for setting up a 40R district, right, where we were able to develop Ace Flats, a 55-unit mixed income building there.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, our partners at the state for our affordable housing projects that we get, we have to acquire funding for, subsidies for, to make work. So,
Yeah.
there's so many different partners that we deal with. And
yeah, maybe just, Andrew, you mentioned a lot of pieces there, I think, that are really, I'm sure our audience would love to hear more about. Can you maybe specifically just speak to the vision of Civico in terms of what the business's focus is?
Yeah, I mean, we there's a few things, and one of them is, I like to say that we work on mixed income communities, right? And when I say mixed income, I mean, we provide housing for everyone, but it's not specific to just affordable housing or just market rate housing. We'll work on, as a firm, we'll work on a project like the one in Sherborne, Abbey Road, that was all market rate, right? Because that's what it called for. That's what the zoning was set up for. That's what the investors and financing, and that's what it was. So we're not going to just back away from a project because it's just market rate. We did the project, and there's so many good things that happened from that project, that came from that project. And but there's another project that we work on that, like there's a mill that we're revitalizing and renovating in Worcester. That's 60 units, and we're working on this, and we're acquiring historic tax credits. We're acquiring low income housing tax credits. We're working with the city of Worcester, and that predominantly is affordable housing, deep affordable housing. And then we'll do something like Oriole Landing, where it's mixed income, where it's 25% affordability. The town of Lincoln supported with a loan to us for the affordable housing component of the project. And so you can see how we work on market rate, we work on mixed income, and we work on affordable. And it's all around sort of housing. Housing is really the driver here. We do have projects that are mixed use, where retail is activating and definitely in urban cores, and that becomes a component of our work. But really, it's housing that kind of drives the process here, or the projects here.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you've stressed to me, and as you mentioned, we've worked together in projects before. The thing that I've always been particularly impressed by is your ability to build relationships with with all the stakeholders in the community and people who are integral to making some of these projects happen. Because as you mentioned, public-private partnerships are vastly more complex than just going and building 100 apartments. There's always a series of conversations that need to take place. Maybe we could speak a little bit to kind of your philosophy on building relationships and how that's kind of enabled your business through kind of what you've built.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is patience. It takes a long time to build projects, right? And you have to have a long-term vision. And a lot of what we do we respond to RFPs and work with towns and cities, right? And those RFPs have been worked on for a number of years before we even come into the picture. And then once we come into the picture, then it's a number of years before you can even get the construction, right? And then you get the construction. I mean, so these are projects that are lasting, could be 5, 10 years, or even 15 years if you talk about the work that was been done, before we got to the table with the town or the city.
Yep.
And so you have to be very patient. You have to have patient capital. You have to have patience working with people. And so that is something I think that we put a lot of emphasis on, and right from the beginning is just being patient. We all want it to go as fast as possible, but that's why I think we're really good at managing the process to get to a solution as quickly as possible, right, to move things along.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you were to give, one of the things that we try to do is help give the audience some perspective, right, as they're contemplating starting their own real estate business. And if you were to give someone, a younger person starting out, kind of in a similar position to you, are there any kind of nuggets of advice you think that would be really maybe helpful, just as a perspective?
Wait, not just younger people, though. Also people starting their second careers.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. 100%. I mean, Andrew just said he started his thing at 40, right? So
yeah,
it's a great point. Yeah. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah. I think a couple of words come to mind, right? One is passion, right? You got to be really passionate about what you do, because the startup period of starting a business, particularly development, isn't easy, and you really got to put some time into it and energy, and you got to have passion to do that, right? Perseverance, because it's not going to be, great from day one. Might not even be great at year 10, right? But you got to enjoy the ups and downs and persevere through, like the bumps and hurdles. So I think having those two, things in mind as you go through start up your own business, I think are really, really important. And an open mind. I mean, don't think that you know everything, right? Whether you're in your second, third, or fourth career, right? Like, ask questions. I think what I've learned the most out of being a developer is our job is to ask questions, right? Because we can't be a master of everything. And so
Yep.
we have to rely on our consultants. We have to rely on the town or city. We have to rely on so many different people. And our job as developers, facilitators, is to ask the right questions, even if they sound dumb, because you never know what will come up in projects.
Oh man, that's so important. Yeah, having an open mind. I had a conversation with a guy who wanted to talk to me about doing a new project. We were talking yesterday, and it was an initial conversation, and he was telling me about it. This is a really interesting idea, exciting idea, and as we got further along in the conversation, I began to realize that he kind of thought, "Oh, I've got it all figured out. Like, don't worry. Like, I got it figured out. I'll take care of it." And it's like, that's just not the process. Like,
when you think
you don't have it figured out.
when you think you have it figured out, the market or outside forces changes it.
Oh yeah.
So you have to
have it figured out.
adapt and be nimble.
Yeah. Just like the construction process, right? And design process. If
Yeah.
you're not constantly adapting and agile, you'll learn your lesson at some point, unfortunately, for those people. But anyway.
Absolutely.
So I guess tell us more about kind of what you're excited about right now, in 2024. I know there's some challenges in the market. You kind of mentioned, certainly interest rates have been challenging. Construction costs have been challenging. What are you focusing on right now? You have a couple of projects that you've gotten through permitting in the last 12 months or so. What are you up to?
Yeah, we have been busy permitting and building our pipeline over the past few years, definitely within the sort of COVID era. And I think we've gotten over some hurdles where we're going to start construction on a few projects that we permitted. A lot of what we do is, permitting and finding projects that are either raw land or, sites that have, we do primarily new construction or renovation, and we do a lot of permitting, right? And entitlement to get those projects ready to be built, and then we'll go and build them as well. And so right now we have, I would say, 3 or 4 projects all ready to start within the next month that we're really excited about building. And it took, definitely 6 to 12 months, even longer, to find the right financing, the right equity partners. During this challenging time, money just is not flowing. And I think that's been the challenge, is finding the right patient capital, whether it's the bank or equity investors, finding the right contractors. Construction pricing is very difficult right now. It's swinging wildly, right? So you got to find the right construction partner. So I think that takes a while. And I would say we're at the moment now where we're ready to break ground on some really cool projects that we've been working on for quite a while. So that's what we're really excited about, and that's going to bring its own set of challenges as well. So we're going to have to sort of pivot as a firm to focus on the execution part of development, right? And so we're excited about that.
I think one of the things you mentioned, Andrew, that I think is particularly interesting, that I think is important for the audience, is understanding your capital sources, right, and their needs, and how it aligns with your needs in terms of financing a project. And you use the term patient capital, and I think that to me is very important. I'm kind of curious, what are the right investors, the right kind of, what are the things that are aligning with your goals and some of the challenges? What are some of those aspects or characteristics that people might, want to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think when I say patient capital, I think that really comes from trust, right? And, we as a firm raise equity with friends and family, right? And those friends and family, maybe plus ones, meaning that like some of your friends may have a friend, but we'll probably stop there, right? Because we want to keep it kind of close, and people that trust us, they know our reputation, they know who we are, what we've done, and they know part of our intention is to work in communities that we're going to be in for a while, right? With, like, say, for example, the town of Lincoln, we're continually working in the town of Lincoln, even after we did Oriole Landing, or the city of Worcester, right? We've done projects in Worcester. We're seeing the benefit of a long-term vision within communities. And so, even capital that comes in, or equity investors, they understand that it's got to be a patient process, and the returns will come, right? It just might not be on day one. It's not a project where it's a 3-year turnaround, right? It's a longer term vision that we have. So,
yeah, it's interesting. There were a lot of real estate equity syndicators, over the last 5 to 10 years that were investing in projects, and they were pooling money, and I feel like that's clearly that's an effective model. People have done that, but part of me, just like having managed the investor relations process and other projects before, I can't imagine having somebody calling me asking me questions about when they're getting their money back or what their return's going to be if I didn't really know them, or one of my partners didn't really have a strong, trusting relationship. Because I can imagine that being that's a hard conversation to begin with. If you know somebody and you have a good relationship, much less somebody you've never met before, and they happen to give you, a meaningful amount of money for a project, I could imagine that just being really challenging. I feel fortunate not to have been kind of had to.
I think that's why we are at the scale that we're at. The type of projects we usually try not to go over, 20-30 million dollars in total development costs, because then you're raising a different type of equity, right? And from folks that you're just not familiar with. It's more institutional.
Yeah.
So, we'd rather do smaller projects, more of smaller projects, right? We're able to fund around friends and family, versus going into that next level, where those are the projects that I worked on at sort of the larger architecture firms. These are just mega projects that, that's kind of what I wanted to get away from. Is I want to get away. I want to do projects that, were a little bit smaller, and that, like we mentioned, friends and family money could you get the equity for.
I think it's really great to point out how you brought up development as a facilitator. I don't think everyone who's outside of the business understands that aspect. And, I think when you're in sales, you teach people to always ask open questions, right? Because open-ended questions that you're going to discover things instead of asking a question and hoping for the answer you want. So that aspect of looking at development is really just wise and it's experience. But I think a lot of people who are new don't understand that. And so I don't know if there's anything more you want to expand on that, of things that people who are outside of, like, I want to build a exciting project, maybe don't really understand that facilitator, that, going in with open questions type of flexibility and agile environment that you discussed.
Yeah, I think, even if it's a small project, a single family home, right, to a project that has multiple funding sources or mixed use and many different uses within the building, every project is complex and it's going to come with hurdles, right? So, no matter what, you're going to come with, there's going to be challenges. And so kind of what I'm saying is you sort of have to leave your ego at the door, right? In this business, because, there's so many, buildings are very complex these days because of energy codes, right? Constructability. You have to trust and work with other people. You can't do it all on your own. And so it's only going to get more complicated, which means that the developer is only going to have to be able to work with people more, right? And so that's where, if you think that you're going to get out and do everything on your own and make your own decisions, and you're kind of very strong-headed and not willing to listen, then I think that this business will drive you out of that because of the complexity of it and where it's going. It's only going to get more complex. It's, all the easy sites have been built on, right? The types of projects that we like working on are, sometimes in tight urban cores. They're complex projects with multiple uses and multiple, parties. And so all I'm getting at is that you got to be able to work with people in this business. It's definitely not a one-person show.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. I do have a question very relevant for 2024, which may be either no answer or a very complicated answer. Any advice in 2024 for keeping construction costs down?
I think it's better. It's better management, right? It's oversight and management of the finances of your project. If I would say there's two things that I'm really focused on in construction, it's changes, right, to drawings, right, and having really good drawings up front, and it's also schedule, right, because your schedule time is money. So those two things within the construction process are really, and there's a lot other ones too as well, right? But those are two that are on top of my mind as we're getting right as we're starting construction projects. You can't get over budget and you can't get out past the projected schedule because it just only gets worse. And so I think the management part of a developer is really key in the construction projects.
Good point.
Yeah, and to that point, are you finding that kind of a design build process in any way helps you, or have you engaged in that way with any of your projects, Andrew?
We've done a few design build projects. I feel that there's, like anything, there's pros and cons. The projects that we are starting construction on are pretty typical projects now, where it's bid GMP or lump sum contracts with contractors, and we have an architect that was separate from that, and it's all about a good set of drawings, particularly with new construction. It's a really ground up construction is taking the time to assemble a really good set of architectural and MEP structural drawings, right? And that's really one of the most important things leading up to a construction project, both for budget, right, and financing, to make sure that you're not having change orders and you're not, having to go back to the well, right? And then it also drives schedule because changes in the field, definitely push schedule out in budget. So those are the two things that are top of mind.
And when are you engaging? When are you engaging the contractor? Is there a pre-construction engagement typically, or are you bidding it out after all the documents are fully complete? Kind of where are you at with that in terms of your philosophy?
Yeah, we typically try to partner or work with a contractor very early on in the process, and we have a few really good construction partners that we've had good experiences with that are sort of our go-to guys, right? But we're all looking for new ways to build things, and so we do look for new contractors as well and new relationships. It's every construction company, I think very importantly is relationship with subcontractors, right? And their ability to manage those subcontractors. So depending on where the project is, what type of project it is, those are all factors that come into selecting the right contractor.
Interesting. Okay, well, this was great. I think our audience will really get a heck of a lot out of this. This is really really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, Andrew. What's the best way to keep in contact and to follow along with Civico?
Yeah, we have a website, civicodevelopment.com. It's not as updated as we want it to be, but that just means we're busy on other things. And but that you can reach out to us on that website.
Okay, great.
And like I mentioned, we have a few partners that like Taylor Bearden and David Oliveri, both are accessible as well. And so we could, and so you can reach out to the three of us.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Andrew. It was great conversation.
Great. Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thanks, man.
We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on today's episode and what topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
Follow us on Spotify to be notified when our next episode is live. To connect with John and I, follow us on LinkedIn.
Thanks for joining us today on Breaking New Ground.